David.
Yeah, I just wanted, the David Suzuki Foundation was started in 1990, and the very first project we had was a paper written by Carl Walters, Fish on the Line. And the second one we did was by Dr. Marty Weinstein and Dr. Lynn Pinkerton, called Fisheries That Work, looking at fisheries around the world that had been what we thought was truly sustainable, to see what were the common features in those sustainable fisheries. And one of the fundamental features was the fishery had to be locally managed with control from local communities and responsibility for the consequences of their control. And I just want to set some perspective on the deliberations tomorrow, because the history of Canada as a country acting is not a very good one, and we should bear this in mind. I just spent 3 intensive days with a group of people from Europe, the United States, and Canada, asking why is it the environmental movement is failing. It's been very, very effective at raising issues, but we're just going fundamentally in the wrong direction. And one of the conclusions was that it's too narrow-based, that we've got to reach out and be much more inclusive of human rights activity, of poverty and hunger, of social justice. These issues have got to be embraced by the environmental community. But the other thing was it's got to work from the bottom up. The top down, and even environmental groups, you big organizations, go into communities and say, we got the answer, this is what you do. It doesn't work. It's got to be bought into by local groups. And having said that, I just want to remind you of Canada's history in an area we've been heavily involved in, and that's in terms of climate change. In 1988, 300 climatologists met in Toronto at a major international conference on the atmosphere, and concluded that the scientific evidence for climate change was in, the planet was warming, and humans were the cause. And a press release at the end of the conference said, this represents a threat to human survival second only to all-out nuclear war. And they called for a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions within 15 years. If we had done that, we would be way beyond the Kyoto target. In 1988, Brian Mulroney was re-elected, and he appointed his brightest political star to be the Minister of the Environment, Lucien Bouchard. I interviewed Lucien Bouchard 3 months after he became Minister of the Environment, and I said, what is the most important environmental issue facing Canada? And immediately he said global warming. And I said, how serious is it? And these are his exact words. It threatens the survival of our species. We've got to act now. So there you are. The science was in, the political will was there, and what has been the history of what Canada has done about that? 1992, the Earth Summit was held in Rio. It was to be the indication, the major shift of direction. And there the goal was already watered down. They said, we want to stabilize 1990 levels by the year 2000. Canada signed that convention on the atmosphere. Stabilize 1990 levels by the year 2000. 1997, Kyoto took place. Canada was there. The people at Kyoto set a target of a 6% reduction below 1990 levels by 2012. Canada signed that. Canada ratified that Kyoto Protocol in 2001. Jean Chrétien didn't ratify that as a liberal. He ratified that as the Prime Minister of Canada. 2004, Putin of Russia ratified, and it became international law for all the people that had signed, including Canada. 2006, we elect a government that immediately said, we don't pay any attention to things like Kyoto, we don't agree with it. So here was an international law that Canada had signed on to, and what our Prime Minister did was declare that we are outlaws internationally. We don't give a shit about Kyoto. We're not going to observe it. And what has happened? Our emissions have gone up so that now, if we want to meet Kyoto, we're going to have to reduce by over 30% of our current rate of emissions. Well, it's an impossible level. This is really a shameful, shameful position. We're continuing to encourage the tar sands. We've now seen Suncor united with Petrocan, and we're making a major commitment now in a fossil fuel that we know must not be developed in the future if we're going to be serious about global warming. And I think that we ought to think about that and say, you know, we say all kinds of wonderful things about what we are going to do as a country. We've got all kinds of Oceans Acts and all, but look at the history of what Canada does. And it sure as hell doesn't show us any leadership coming out of Ottawa. What PNCIMA does is give us an opportunity for local groups here to just take this issue over and do something and really just say to Ottawa, give us the money to let us continue this process. But don't look to Ottawa for leadership.
Thank you. Perhaps almost a fitting note to almost end on. And the almost is that I want to congratulate you for for going through this whole day. It's been a very long day, and it's going to be duplicated in length tomorrow. And I say that without any hesitation, because it's going to be a long day, and we're going to start promptly at 8:30 as we did today. So behave yourselves tonight, please. I want to remind you how important this is. It may have seemed scattered or in some ways like pinning jelly to the wall this afternoon, but this is extremely helpful material. It's copious material, and it's something that the steering committee is going to have to grapple with and will grapple with. One of the highlights of tomorrow will be last thing in the day when the steering committee gets up here and talks about what they have learned and what their next steps are going to be. And I hope you'll raise questions with them and ask them about how they're going to move forward from here. The other thing I just want to notice before 5 o'clock hits us, as an external again, is the way you have handled the elephants in the room. I'm not referring to any of you personally, of course, but you know, you have a choice of keeping those elephants under the table, and you haven't done that in a number of cases, or elevating them and talking about them and noticing them, and you did that, and you did so, I think, very generally in a very respectful way. And the other choice would have been to allow them to just stampede, and you have avoided that temptation. Thank you for not having the elephants stampede. Tomorrow's going to be, as I say, just as jam-packed as today was. The shift, you remember, moves from vision, which was today's major theme, to stakeholder engagement, retention, involvement. What does it mean to do that? How do you keep them in the process? How do you structure it? And then maybe more fundamentally, if you want some homework, you might want to think about who is a stakeholder anyhow. We've blithely used that term today, and yet it's received a tremendous amount of critique and definition over the last 20, 25 years. You know, someone who cares about outcomes, someone who's affected by the outcome, someone who's significantly affected by the outcome. I remember a great definition from a few years ago in the terrestrial land use area, someone who ought not to be surprised, which I think is an interesting take. So think about who is a stakeholder anyhow, and how are we going to engage these people? Tomorrow will be built around that and built around experiences in other jurisdictions, because there are some on that subject of stakeholder involvement and engagement. I want to also remind you to please, if you haven't already, fill out those evaluation forms, because for reasons that we heard recently at Table 16 and elsewhere, there are critiques out there. For goodness sakes, be frank about it. I can't imagine you would hold back. And please, if you could remember to drop your evaluation form in the evaluation form box, which is just out to the right and on your way out of the building. Final reminder, starting today at 6 o'clock, which is an hour from now, there is a reception, which I think a lot of you are coming to. I hope you will. It's being sponsored, I think you know, by Nikon Wind Energy and Enbridge Northern Gateway Pipelines. Through their kindness. It's going to be in the combination of Westminster 1, 2, and 3, which are just around the corner. There will be food and drink. I can't believe the drink will be free. I don't think it is. So, but I may be wrong. I don't know. But I think there'll be appetizers and so on. I don't plan on dinner. So hope to see you there at 6 o'clock. That runs from 6 till 8 tonight around the corner. Otherwise, see you tomorrow morning, and thank